Uncertainty in the air this Wednesday night as Air Transat pilots vote in favor of a strike, what the union is fighting for.
We still have a far ways to go.
And the sticking points. An uphill battle for health care benefits for veterans.
They don't understand why they are denied.
The obstacles they face getting the help they deserve. Forget Buy American. ICE will soon drive Canadian-made armored vehicles.
It's entirely inappropriate.
What's behind an Ontario company's $10 million contract with U.S. immigration? Plus, Trash Panda gets trashed. What happens when a raccoon breaks into a liquor store?
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Just ahead of the busy holiday travel season, a looming strike could ground another Canadian airline. Pilots at Air Transat have voted overwhelmingly to strike if contract talks between their union and the company fail. If that happens, flights could be grounded starting later next week. Mike Armstrong has our top story on what Air Transat pilots are unhappy about and the potential impact on the airline industry.
Checking bags for a 7-day trip to Cuba isn't the ideal place to hear the airline carrying you might not bring you back. Air Transat pilots now have a strike mandate that could start December 10th, the day these passengers are scheduled to come home. I don't want to think about it, this woman says. I don't want to ruin my vacation. I need a vacation, this man says. I guess it just might be longer. Well, just a few kilometers from Montreal's Trudeau Airport, the Union for Air Transat Pilots has set up a call center. They're advising members of what a work stoppage could mean if they're stranded. The 700 Air Transat pilots they're calling likely aren't surprised, considering they voted 99% to give the union a strike mandate.
We're humbled and stuff. We knew our pilots were behind us, and this proves that.
The last collective agreement between Air Transat pilots and the company was signed in 2015. It expired 5 years ago and was then extended a few times. But negotiations have been going on since January on a new deal. At issue, the union says, retirement and insurance programs, scheduling, and salaries.
We're closing up that gap, but we still have a far ways to go.
Well, the company says progress is being made at the bargaining table. In a statement, it says the union's strike mandate is, quote, a common step in the collective bargaining process, and that its aim is to reach a tentative agreement without labor dispute. Well, one hurdle for negotiators may be the high bar set by another airline just last year. Air Canada pilots, members of the same umbrella union as Air Transat pilots, got a 42% pay increase over 4 years.
There's a lot of expectation from Air Transat pilots to get the same treatment, and they have the union to back them.
The same union?
ALPA, the same union to back them.
Both Air Canada and WestJet pilots came close to striking in 2024, but reached deals last minute. Air Transat now has to decide what it can do in a difficult financial situation, what would it cost to give pilots what they want, versus whether it can afford a labor dispute, particularly over the holidays. Donna?
Okay, Mike Armstrong in Montreal, thank you. A Calgary teenager is facing criminal charges accused of using artificial intelligence to create and distribute child pornography. Investigators allege the 17-year-old generated sexualized photos of girls at several high schools in the Calgary area.
Our biggest takeaway from today is that we need people to understand that this is not a joke, it's not a prank. This is the most extreme form of bullying and a criminal offense.
The 17-year-old has been released on conditions including no use of electronics or contact with anyone under the age of 16 unless incidental to work or school. The advocate for Canadian veterans says they aren't always getting the health care help they need. And when they try to appeal a decision by Veterans Affairs, the reasons for denial are too often unclear and confusing. Heidi Petracek explains the findings and the effect on injured and ill veterans.
Military veterans who suffer injury, illness, or disability in service often turn to Veterans Affairs Canada for coverage for specific health needs, like a motorized wheelchair or specialized concussion treatments. But if their application is denied and then denied again on appeal, the Veterans Ombud says the reasons given aren't good enough.
They say to me, I don't even understand why I've been denied.
So the Ombud looked at Veterans Affairs Canada's internal review process and found what she calls systemic unfairness in two areas. For one thing, retired Colonel Nashika Jardine found denial letters often don't address the very reasons behind a veteran's appeal. Many letters contained large sections of copy-pasted statutory, regulatory, or policy language, her report says, including in some cases lengthy sections that were not relevant to the decision. And when a veteran makes that initial appeal, she found, the case isn't being examined thoroughly enough.
What we found is that it's kind of the opposite is happening.
Mike Mahoney agrees. He's embroiled in a struggle to get critical injury benefits from Veterans Affairs. We first met him last year. But he also helps others navigate the system.
If they were more forthcoming with why a veteran was denied this particular benefit or service, they would give them better information on whether or not to even continue to pursue this.
As for whether the department will make the changes the Ombud has recommended, one veterans advocate is skeptical.
Many other things need to change that other ombudsmen have written about that have never been acted upon.
The report didn't examine why some appeals were denied or how long the process takes, both long-standing frustrations for veterans. The Minister of Veterans Affairs, Jill McKnight, was not available to answer questions about the Ombud's report. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
There is some more clarity from Ontario's Premier about the layoffs at Algoma Steel. Doug Ford says he was aware layoffs were coming before his government loaned the company $100 million. Algoma announced on Monday it's cutting about 1,000 jobs at its Sault Ste. Marie plant. It said some layoffs were planned as it transitions to an electric arc furnace, but that the U.S. tariffs accelerated those layoffs by a year. Ford says Algoma needed the $100 million to keep from shutting down completely.
We have two choices. The Titanic was sinking up there. We either save, 2/3 or we don't save anything. And I believe in saving the company up there, allocating funds to keep them going, and that's exactly what we did. And if we didn't put up that $100 million and the feds didn't put up $400 million, I don't think that plant would be standing right now.
The federal government loaned $400 million to Algoma in September. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, better known as ICE, is buying armored vehicles from a Canadian company. ICE has issued a rush order from Roshel, a company in Brampton, Ontario. Roshel also has contracts to build hundreds of tactical trucks for Ukraine. But the deal to supply ICE, which has been accused of human rights violations in the U.S., doesn't sit well with everyone. Jillian Piper reports.
There have been thousands of ICE raids just like this one, and soon Canadian equipment could be used to help the agency carry them out.
There's a baby in there!
U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement has ordered 20 armored vehicles from Brampton, Ontario-based manufacturer Roshel, valued around $10 million.
The percentage of the Canadian content in our vehicle is higher than any other vehicle.
Roshel did not immediately respond to Global News' request for comment, but a procurement notice says the company was the only manufacturer able to meet the agency's technical requirements and deliver within 30 days.
ICE officers who are the toughest people you'll ever meet.
The order comes as U.S. President Donald Trump is expanding ICE operations, even though the agency is facing allegations of human rights abuses over its treatment of undocumented immigrants.
It's entirely inappropriate for a Canadian military supplier to be under contract to furnish a foreign agency that faces credible allegations of patterns of human rights abuses.
Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand would not say if she has any concerns about the contract, but did emphasize that the federal government has not yet been involved in the transaction.
Canada and the United States have a strong bilateral relationship with an open line of communication in which, if necessary, I will raise the issues with Secretary Rubio.
But this former Foreign Affairs Minister says despite pressure for the deal to proceed, the government should intervene.
Are we prepared to stand up to Mr. Trump and the illegality of what he's doing and say that Canada still is a voice for fairness and justice and protection of people's rights?
Ottawa blocking this trade deal could upset Trump, a risk to the trade talks that have been stalled since late October, Donna. But Prime Minister Mark Carney may be hoping to convince the president to restart those negotiations on Friday, when the pair is set to meet in Washington for the FIFA World Cup draw.
All right. Jillian Piper, thank you. The Trump administration is cracking down harder on legal immigration to the U.S., pausing applications from people from 19 countries, which it deems to be high risk. It's a response to the shooting of 2 National Guard members in Washington last week. The gunman from Afghanistan received asylum in the U.S. earlier this year. Jackson Prosco reports on the sweeping changes to U.S. immigration.
The immigration crackdown is expanding to New Orleans and Minnesota, where federal agents are expected to target the state's large Somalian population.
Let them go back to where they came from.
Somalian immigrants, many of whom are U.S. citizens, have become a focus for the president, who insists they don't belong in America.
I don't want them in our country. Their country's no good for a reason. Their country stinks, and we don't want them in our country.
All of it is happening against the backdrop of sweeping changes to the U.S. immigration system. Asylum and citizenship applications for residents of 19 countries are now paused and subject to re-review. The list includes Somalia and Afghanistan after the shooting of National Guard members in Washington, allegedly by an Afghan asylum seeker.
At an absolute standstill for all of those cases. If they had an interview scheduled, those are being canceled, oftentimes without notice.
Immigrants from impacted countries are now caught in limbo. The rules they were told to follow to stay legally have suddenly changed.
They have been promised an oath ceremony to become a U.S. citizen, to take the oath of allegiance to the United States, and their oath ceremonies were canceled.
The change applies to immigrants and asylum seekers admitted over the last 4 years, as the White House demands extra vetting of those already in the country.
Past presidents have failed to ensure that all prospective citizens love America.
The longer the immigration pause lasts, the more likely legal status will expire for millions of asylum seekers and visa holders, potentially creating a new class of illegal immigrants who will go from applying for citizenship to facing deportation. The 19 countries facing the immigration pause were already subject to a travel ban by the United States, and the Trump administration warns that ban could soon be expanded to as many as 30 countries. Donna?
Jackson Prosco in Washington. Thanks, Jackson. Coming up, the doctor who supplied actor Matthew Perry with ketamine goes to prison. Plus, why this 69-year-old Canadian went on an epic bike ride around the world. Canada is spending another $235 million on Ukraine, most of it going to supply Kyiv with American military equipment. NATO's Secretary General says Russia's President Vladimir Putin believes he can outlast NATO, and the West cannot let up on the pressure. And Mark Rutte heaped praise on the efforts of President Trump to end the war. Redmond Shannon reports.
NATO foreign ministers at Brussels HQ. Among them, Canada's Anita Anand, but a notable absentee, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, instead sending his deputy, Christopher Landau, to stand beside NATO chief Mark Rutte. If the Secretary-General felt slighted by the superpower, he hardly showed it, echoing Rubio's words on Fox News almost verbatim.
The only leader in the world that can talk to both sides.
There is only one person in the whole world who was able to break the deadlock.
President
Donald J. Trump.
United faith in Trump to solve an apparently intractable war. Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov says no compromise was found during Tuesday's meeting between Trump's negotiating team and Vladimir Putin. The Russian president, who chooses his words carefully, said Tuesday if Europe decides to wage war on Russia, his country is ready. The war in Ukraine is already devouring billions of dollars in the West, Canada pledging another $235 million Wednesday.
But we must do more, and all allies need to pull their weight to ensure that we are prepared and that the responsibility is fairly shared.
Just a few kilometres away in Brussels, the European Union announced it will finally wean off buying Russian gas in 2027. It's also trying to finalise a controversial plan to use frozen Russian assets as collateral for loans to Ukraine. Strong dissent remains from Belgium, where the funds are kept, as it fears Russian reprisals.
We have the frustrating feeling of not having been heard. Our concerns
are being downplayed.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says his negotiators are now preparing to travel to the US to meet with their American counterparts, likely for a debrief on Tuesday's meeting in Moscow. Donna?
Okay, Redmond. Shannon in London. Thanks, Redmond. New images from convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein's private island have been released by the U.S. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee. The photos and videos taken in 2020 show a no trespassing sign. They show multiple bedrooms, a phone with names on speed dial, and a chalkboard with some words on it, including power and deception. And there's what looks like a dentist's office with masks on the wall. Multiple survivors allege they were sex trafficked by Epstein and abused on his private island. One of two doctors charged with supplying actor Matthew Perry's fatal overdose has been sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. Dr. Salvador Placencia pleaded guilty in July to 4 counts of illegally distributing ketamine to the Friends star. He was one of 5 people charged in a multi-year federal probe into how Perry obtained large quantities of the drug. Court records say Placencia taught Perry's assistant to inject the drug, actions prosecutors say took advantage of the star's struggles. Royal charter ahead, where the historic Hudson's Bay Company document will end up. After the Hudson's Bay Company filed for creditor protection in March, the fate of the company's historic royal charter has been in jeopardy. Now, 2 of Canada's wealthiest families, the Thompsons and Westons, have teamed up to buy it. Vasilios Bellos reports on the charter's future and where you'll soon be able to see it. Vasilios.
An uncontested $18 million bid for the Hudson's Bay Charter means the document will stay in the public's hands. Pending court approval next week, the document will be donated to 4 institutions, including the Manitoba Museum.
This is a historic moment for Canadians and absolutely for the Manitoba Museum as well.
CEO Dorota Blumczynska says this is massive for the Manitoba Museum and 3 other institutions, the Archives of Manitoba, the Canadian Museum of History, and the Royal Ontario Museum. She says it brings a range of emotions, with the charter being a way to educate Canadians of our country's complicated past.
While I celebrate this moment because of the gifts I think it can give to our future, I also sit in solemn with this moment because it is the returning of a document that caused irreparable harms.
The charter granted the Hudson's Bay Company the right of sole trade over a large portion of modern-day Canada. It meant the company had exclusive rights to trade fur and harvest minerals and fish from the Hudson's Bay drainage.
It framed Indigenous occupancy of these lands or Indigenous sovereignty of these lands as being lesser because they weren't underwritten by Christianity.
The charter took away Indigenous jurisdiction of these lands before many groups had even interacted with the British. Assistant Professor of History and Indigenous Studies at Western University, Cody Grout, says the charter resulted in the company being an active player in colonialism.
Not just operating as a business, but also operating as a government as well, devising a colony, imposing immigration schemes, negotiating treaties with Indigenous nations.
The $18 million bid was paired with a $5 million contribution to support conservation, public display, and a national consultation process, including First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities. Vasilios Bellos, Global News, Winnipeg.
More than just setting a record. Next, the personal reason this Ontario man embarked on a round-the-world cycling trip. If pictures tell a story, this one only needs 2, really. Officers were called to a break-in at a liquor store in Ashland, Virginia, and located the offender, passed out in the bathroom. After a few hours of sleep and no sign of injury other than a raging hangover, the raccoon was released back into the wild. An Ontario man is back home after an epic journey around the world. The 69-year-old rode his bike and is hoping to soon hold the Guinness World Record for the oldest person to cycle around the globe. And as Megan King explains, there is a deeply personal reason he did it.
So welcome to day 20. Welcome to day 126 and welcome to day 237.
It's been 11 months since 69-year-old Mark Herbst was last home. He's been cycling 30,000 kilometers around the world while raising more than $50,000 for cancer research in honor of his late wife.
When you have somebody that you've lost that's close to you, you know, you lose so much. And I was still happy. I was still a happy guy. You know, like I still laugh at things. I have a lot of fun still. But, you know, there was something missing.
The Ontarian began his journey in Bangkok, Thailand, trekking across 25 countries, experiencing 25 cultures.
Turkey and Albania and Slovenia and Georgia. You know, I really didn't know what to expect. People were just so friendly.
Riding between 8 and 12 hours every day, Herbst's achievement is impressive. His coach says his athleticism rivals that of Olympians.
A 69-year-old man who didn't just have support for a few 100-kilometer bike ride, solo on a 100-plus pound bike.
Herbst hopes to set the Guinness record for oldest person to circumnavigate the world by bike, even crossing paths on his travel with a New Zealand man sharing that goal.
And he got it, because he finished before I did. But we were sending messages back and forth and cheering each other on. But he's only 66. So, you know, when he got it, I said, enjoy it. I'll let you have it for a few months, and then I'm going to take it away.
Arriving back in Toronto on Monday, Herbst hopes people are inspired by his journey and work to challenge themselves.
It can be learn a language, learn how to play guitar, anything. Just, you know, challenge yourself so we're growing all the time.
Megan King, Global News, Toronto.
What an inspiration. That is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Whitehorse. We'd love to see your festive Canada photos. Please email them to globalnational@globalnews.ca. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.